Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named Falling Skies, Season 1 and Season 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with a massive alien spaceship invading Earth. With their advanced technology and armored mech-like bodies, the aliens begin a brutal massacre of all life on the planet. Not only that, but they abducted young children for experiments, implanting a spine-like device into their bodies that resembles a parasite. Any child with the implant becomes under the aliens' control. If the implant is violently removed, the child's body dies instantly. 6 months later, only a small portion of humanity remains. To drive the invaders out and reclaim their home, the survivors form a resistance army. A history professor named Tom lost his beloved wife in the alien attack. With no other choice, he joins the resistance army with his 3 sons. However, his second son, Ben, is captured by the aliens. One night, Tom, his eldest son, Hal, and 4 other freedom fighters form a temporary strike team, planning to search for supplies under the cover of darkness. They hope the night will conceal them, but the aliens quickly detect their presence. The aliens' combat strength is terrifying. One simple attack from them is as powerful as a human's ultimate move. Faced with such overwhelming force, humans have no way to fight back other than to flee. Tom and Hal run for their shitty lives, hiding beneath some rubble, but their comrades aren't as lucky. One of them is struck by a laser cannon, collapsing instantly. Hal, wanting to rescue his comrade, tries to rush out, but Tom desperately stops him. Sure enough, several octopus-like alien creatures surround their fallen comrade within seconds, tearing into his body. Tom and Hal can't afford to grieve. They seize the opportunity when the monsters are distracted and escape from the wreckage, reuniting with the rest of their team. Just as they meet up, they spot an alien spaceship soaring overhead. This is the alien mothership. A powerful laser blasts from the ship, creating a shockwave so intense that even Tom feels it hundreds of meters away. As the laser strikes the ground, a nearby city is instantly obliterated. The alien base is drawing closer to the Resistance's headquarters. At this rate, it's only a matter of time before they're discovered. The commander of the Resistance understands the danger and decides to split the group into smaller units to avoid a full-scale ambush. He appoints Weaver as the commander of the 2nd Legion, with Tom as his deputy. That night, as Hal gazes up at the massive alien ship in the sky, he reflects on the comrades they've lost and the brother still in the aliens' hands. He silently vows to drive these invaders from Earth. Meanwhile, Weaver and Tom, now in charge of hundreds of civilians, face the daunting task of relocating them, an effort complicated by the presence of the elderly, women, and children, as well as a deadly shortage of supplies. To expedite the evacuation, Hal and 5 other freedom fighters decide to infiltrate an alien-occupied warehouse to gather supplies. Hal's girlfriend is among them. After studying the warehouse's layout, they decide to split into 2 teams. Hal and his girlfriend will scout ahead while the others follow. During the recon while near a river, Hal hears the distinct sound of mechanized footsteps. He quickly hides, and sure enough, a group of mechanical creatures passes by, leading a group of children controlled by the spine implants. Hal peeks out and is horrified to see his own brother Ben among them. Hal rushes back to base to inform his father of Ben's location and insists they rescue him immediately. However, Tom, fully aware of the aliens' military might, knows that their small group wouldn't stand a chance since they were armed only with a few guns. It would not only fail to rescue Ben, but also risk the entire Resistance's survival. Desperate, Hal wants to go alone, but Tom stops him. Having already lost Ben, he cannot afford to lose Hal as well. He tells Hal that they need to plan carefully. Now that they know where Ben is, they must develop a foolproof strategy to ensure the safety of the Resistance and successfully rescue Ben. Under Tom's leadership, the makeshift squad finally arrived at the warehouse and began searching for supplies. They were completely unaware that a pair of eyes was watching them from the shadows. Suddenly, a mechanical octopus monster lunged at them. Although they had firearms, the bullets were useless against the creature's tough exterior. Tom could only watch helplessly as the octopus monster charged toward him. Just in the nick of time, a companion ran over and shot the creature in the head, blowing it apart. However, they still had to contend with a laser-shooting mechanical monster. The laser monster began firing at Tom, who dodged and weaved. Meanwhile, Hal snuck up from behind, and Tom placed a bomb inside a shopping cart, pushing it toward the laser monster. After a huge explosion, the laser monster was reduced to a pile of scrap. Despite the close call, the squad managed to bring back the supplies, including a scooter for the kids. Seeing their smiles brought a moment of joy to everyone. But the challenges didn't stop there. The aliens were too powerful, and weapons were essential. The ones they had would never be enough, especially since they were likely to encounter even more dangerous monsters on their journey. So, Tom decided to head to the armory. However, on the way there, he discovered footprints from mechanical creatures, suggesting that the armory had probably been overtaken by the aliens. they would have to proceed with extreme caution. To test the aliens' fighting capabilities inside the armory, Tom tossed out a toy ball. Immediately, a golden retriever ran after it, and a mechanical monster appeared, attracted by the noise. The golden retriever growled in warning, which enraged the mechanical monster. Just as the dog was about to become the monster's meal, Tom's youngest son rushed out to protect the dog. Tom quickly ran after him and scooped him up. The incident alerted the enemy, forcing the group to retreat to their base temporarily. However, without enough weapons, they wouldn't be able to continue. After a quick regroup, they set off for the armory again. They carefully navigated through the pitch-black surroundings, finally reaching the armory. But as soon as they let their guard down, 2 arrows were shot from the shadows. And these weren't from the aliens, they came from their own people. Among the survivors of Earth, there were 2 factions. One was Tom's resistance group, and the other, a terrorist faction that used force and intimidation to take supplies from others. The people who attacked them were from the latter. Hal and his girlfriend had been captured by the terrorist John. The group didn't dare shoot, fearing it would attract the aliens. To keep Hal safe, they reluctantly lowered their weapons. The makeshift squad was taken to the terrorists' base near the armory, where John questioned them. To conceal their identity, Tom lied, claiming they were refugees from Ukraine. But John, who had encountered many resistance members, quickly saw through Tom's poor lie. Without hesitation, he pulled the trigger, ready to execute Tom. But just in time, Hal revealed their true identity and offered John a heavy machine gun at their camp as a trade to secure their release. John knew the power of such a weapon and the increasing alien threat, so he decided to keep the others as hostages while sending Hal back alone to retrieve the gun. On the way back, Hal tried to resist the guard, Maggie, but failed. He had no choice but to return to base and explain everything. He thought the headquarters would immediately send a rescue mission, but Captain Weaver believed that the first priority should be the safety of the civilians. If they handed over their weapons, the civilians would be left unprotected. Even if they attempted a rescue, it would only happen after evacuating the civilians to safety. By then, Tom might already be dead. Hal, in a state of emotional turmoil, was locked in a room by Captain Weaver and placed under strict surveillance by Mike. Not wanting to just let him die, Mike secretly gave Hal a gun and quietly let him go. While waiting for Hal's return, Tom overheard John mentioning the strategy to fight the octopus-like mechanical creatures. First, break their legs to slow them down, then shoot them in the head. At that moment, Maggie returned with Hal to the armory. When John saw that Hal had failed to bring back the weapons, he mocked the resistance, saying that their bonds were weak. He then decided to infiltrate the resistance himself. Maggie and the other 2 stayed behind at the armory to guard the hostages. Soon, John arrived at the resistance headquarters with a white flag. However, it wasn't a surrender, it was a challenge. He threatened that if they didn't hand over their weapons, he would fire a flare to attract the aliens. No one would be able to escape then. To protect the civilians, Captain Weaver had no choice but to surrender all of their supplies and weapons. On the other side, the 2 terrorists guarding the hostages began to have sinister intentions toward Hal's girlfriend. Just as it seemed she would be assaulted, Maggie, in a moment of rage and empathy, shot and killed the 2 terrorists since she had been through something similar herself. Now that she had killed her own comrades, she knew there would be no mercy from John when he returned, so Maggie decided to betray them and join the resistance. John successfully obtained the supplies and was preparing to leave when Tom led the makeshift squad to intercept him. A fierce gunfight ensued, attracting the attention of the aliens. Realizing he couldn't fight the aliens, John quickly abandoned his team and fled in a vehicle. Meanwhile, the alien ships fired artillery at the Resistance's headquarters. During his escape, John was captured by Captain Weaver, who was forced to join the Army's ranks. After the dust settled, the group decided to rescue Ben. They observed the aliens forcing children to collect scrap metal, but they were unclear on what it was for. While discussing their strategy, one of the team members accidentally knocked a brick off the roof. The mechanical monsters noticed and began shooting at the roof. With the aliens now aware of their presence, the rescue operation had to be postponed. Back at the camp, Tom was surrounded by a group of civilians. They had also lost their children in the disaster. Upon hearing that Tom was going to rescue his son, many of them brought photos of their own children, hoping Tom would help them. Understanding the pain of being separated from one's child, Tom instructed them to pin the photos on the bulletin board and promised to do everything in his power to help. At the same time, the makeshift squad received good news. They had made contact with several other split-up military units, meaning they were no longer alone. However, alien bases were stationed in various cities, and the threat they posed remained unknown, making them a serious danger. Additionally, they had brought back Dr. Grace, a skilled medic who had previously removed back armor from 3 children. Captain Weaver, knowing Tom had found Ben's whereabouts, planned to use Ben in an experiment to remove the back armor. He tried to comfort Tom, saying the success rate was low, but it was better than having no hope at all. With the experiment in mind and Tom's desire to save his son, they set off on another rescue mission. However, just as things were reaching a critical point, Mike discovered his own son was also at the alien base. Desperate to save his child, Mike ignored the plan and rushed forward to embrace him, inadvertently drawing the attention of the aliens. The team had no choice but to retreat. During the explosion that followed, Tom lost consciousness. Hal's girlfriend, Karen, was captured by the aliens, and Hal got separated from the rest of the team. As he looked back, he saw a blinding light and realized the aliens had arrived, bringing several children wearing back armor. Confused and unsure of what to do, Hal heard gunshots. The aliens opened fire on the children, killing them instantly. Although the aliens couldn't communicate with humans, Hal knew this was their warning. If they attempted another rescue, more children would die. Upon waking up, Tom learned that Hal had become separated from the team. He angrily scolded Mike for acting without orders and decided to go after Hal alone. With Ben still missing, Tom couldn't allow Hal to vanish as well. Tom ventured through the dark tunnels alone, only to be attacked by a mechanical octopus. Recalling John's instructions on how to defeat it, Tom broke its legs, and the creature let out a painful screech before going still. It seemed that John's advice really worked. Aliens were not invincible. Tom tied up the dying creature and brought it back to the base, where everyone was astonished that he had subdued such a large monster on his own. Tom then told Captain Weaver everything that had happened, only to have Weaver take Tom's gun, claiming that such a useful weapon should be kept for self-preservation. In the midst of the apocalypse, the darker sides of human nature became evident. Tom said nothing more and continued his search for Hal. Fortunately, Hal was not in any immediate danger, and they met halfway. Hal recounted everything he had witnessed and told Tom that rescuing Ben could lead to more child deaths. If they wanted to save the children, they would need to deal with the alien bases. Meanwhile, since Mike's son Rick had been rescued, he had become an experimental subject for Captain Weaver. Dr. Grace was preparing to remove the back armor from Rick when she noticed strange green slime still oozing from the point where the armor was attached to the body. Carefully, she began to cut away the back armor, but as soon as it was removed, Rick started twitching uncontrollably. The doctor quickly administered a few sedatives, and then they had to wait, observing whether Rick would have any adverse reactions. During this time, the octopus creature captured by Tom was locked up in the base. The doctor tried to communicate with it, hoping to learn what planet it came from and what its purpose on Earth was, but the alien clearly didn't understand human language. However, when Dr. Grace showed it photos of other dead octopuses, it reacted, seemingly in pain. At least it was clear now that the alien creatures seemed to have emotional attachments. The next morning, Rick finally woke up, much to Mike's joy, but Rick looked confused and didn't recognize him. Instead, he called the octopus creature in the cage Dad. Seeing his son in such a state, Mike angrily demanded answers from the creature, but since they couldn't communicate, it was a futile effort. In his frustration, Mike grabbed a nearby gun barrel and shoved it into the octopus's mouth, causing it to collapse instantly. It was hard enough to capture a live specimen for study, and if something went wrong, it would be a disaster. Mike quickly informed the two doctors. Dr. Grace found this strange and decided to dissect the previous octopus corpse. She discovered that there was a nerve in its mouth connected to its brain, meaning Mike had unknowingly touched the creature's brain, which caused it to faint. Meanwhile, Rick, now awake, seemed strangely drawn to the removed spine and picked it up. To everyone's surprise, he reattached it to his own body, and the back armor fused with his spine instantly. At that moment, Dr. Harris's radio received a strange signal. Someone nearby was contacting the outside world. The octopus was still in its cage, and there was no way anyone in the resistance would be helping the aliens. So who was sending the signal? Mike suddenly remembered his son was still alone in the laboratory. The team rushed to the lab and found Rick trying to open the cage where the octopus was being held. Thankfully, they arrived just in time to stop the creature from escaping. Mike was frantic, asking his son what he was trying to do, but Rick replied that either he kills him or he lets them go, or they'll all die. Mike was lost, not understanding what his son meant. He believed Rick was being controlled by the spine and without considering his son's well-being, pulled it off. Rick fell unconscious again. Their previous investigations had shown that only children with the back armor were under the aliens' control, so what caused Rick, who had removed his armor, to reattach it on his own? Meanwhile, Tom received a mission to find transportation. The team visited a motorcycle shop but noticed an octopus sleeping under a nearby bridge. John immediately decided to kill it, but Tom stopped him, advising him not to stir up trouble and risk attracting unnecessary danger. John didn't say anything, but once inside the shop, shop, knocked out his companions and took a bucket of gasoline to the bridge. The gasoline barrel was rigged with explosives, and when John threw it near the octopus, it exploded, reducing the creature to a puddle of mush. However, the explosion attracted a group of children controlled by the back armor. Tom ordered everyone to stop shooting and to immediately mount their motorcycles and retreat. Just then, another octopus appeared. For Tom, this octopus was now a small threat, especially since it was the only one. They quickly dealt with it and started to retreat. But strangely, when the octopus was killed, the children under its control stopped moving. To uncover the mystery, Dr. Harris decided to perform a live dissection on the octopus. However, the octopus seemed to anticipate this. As he shined a flashlight into its eyes, trying to study it, the creature suddenly attacked. Although Dr. Grace used an electric gun to stun the octopus, in those few seconds, Dr. Harris lost his life and ascended to heaven to meet Jesus. When Captain Weaver returned and learned of Dr. Harris's death, he immediately ordered that the news be kept a secret, insisting it could not reach the civilians. Revealing it would cause panic and erode the people's trust in the resistance. Dr. Harris was the most skilled doctor in the resistance, and losing him was like losing their right-hand man. Enraged, Captain Weaver wanted to kill the octopus creature, but Dr. Grace stopped him. They hadn't fully studied the creature yet, and killing it now would mean Dr. Harris's death had been in vain. After securing motorcycles, Tom and his group finally returned to the camp. Having witnessed the alien creatures killing children firsthand, Hal had been obsessing over how to rescue his brother Ben. Finally, he came up with a plan. He intended to disguise himself as one of the children controlled by the back armor, infiltrate the group, and rescue Ben. Tom immediately rejected the idea. He wasn't going to let Hal put himself in harm's way. But Hal was determined. The longer his brother stayed with the aliens, the more danger he was in. Hal had grown considerably, and after some thought, Tom reluctantly agreed. They approached Dr. Grace to see if she had any new findings, especially regarding a way to kill the octopus creature instantly. Dr. Grace explained what had happened with Mike and the octopus creature. She told them that if they could quickly sever the connection between the octopus's upper jaw and its brain, it would die. She demonstrated with the creature in the cage, and sure enough, it immediately lost its life signs. Before heading out to rescue Ben, Hal sought advice from the recently awakened Rick. He wanted to learn more about how to convincingly mimic a child under alien control. However, Rick only stared at him expressionlessly and chillingly said that they would all die. Since he couldn't get any help from Rick, Hal gave up on that approach. Instead, he found a discarded spine in the lab, attached it to himself, and disguised himself as a child controlled by the back armor to infiltrate the alien base. Nervously, Hal followed a pair of children into a room, hoping he wouldn't be discovered. Fortunately, the aliens didn't notice anything unusual. Once inside, the children curled up on the floor and Hal followed their lead, lying down. He soon realized it was time to sleep when the other children closed their eyes. Since Hal didn't close his eyes, an alien approached and gently stroked his head as though it were his mother. Sadly, Hal wasn't truly controlled by the spine, and no matter how tender the alien was, he could never see these alien invaders as family. Hal pretended to be asleep, waiting for the aliens to lower their guard. As soon as they did, he pulled out the prepared knife and was ready to strike. But just as he drew the blade, the boy next to him opened his eyes. To Hal's surprise, it was his brother Ben. Fearing that Ben would ruin the plan, Hal quickly took action. But because it was so sudden, he missed his mark. Thankfully, Tom had followed him and they killed the octopus creature together. However, the children around them started to get uneasy. Tom and Hal quickly brought the children back to the headquarters, where Dr. Grace performed the back armor removal surgery. The surgery went smoothly, and Ben soon woke up. Unlike Rick, he didn't suffer from any confusion. The moment he saw Tom, he immediately recognized him as his biological father. Tom was overwhelmed with emotion. Finally, the family was reunited. But as they celebrated their reunion, a dark secret was unfolding. Some humans, desperate to survive, had secretly struck deals with the aliens, selling human children to them in exchange for their own safety. This traitor was a lieutenant in the resistance. In order to stay alive, the traitor had set his sights on the children Tom had just rescued. He went to the 2nd Legion and informed Captain Weaver that the aliens were preparing a full-scale attack. The traitor suggested that they move the children to a safer location he knew, while the adults stayed behind to fight off the alien assault. The children were Earth's future, so protecting them was the highest priority. Captain Weaver then sent Mike with the traitor to transfer the children to the safe area. Mike, along with the children, followed the traitor to a secluded area. It was a flat piece of land, but there was a large house that made Mike uneasy. He asked the traitor where they were, and realizing that Mike had caught on, the traitor stopped hiding hiding the truth. He revealed his deal with the aliens and tried to convince Mike to join them. He continued to say that humanity is doomed and the only way to survive now is to follow the aliens. In this remote area, Mike didn't dare act recklessly. He pretended to agree with the traitor, planning to escape with the children once the traitor let his guard down. But sneaking so many children away quietly would clearly be difficult. To ensure their safety, Mike decided to use himself as bait to buy the children some time to escape. By the time the traitor realized what was happening, the children had already gotten far away. It wasn't until then that Captain Weaver realized something was wrong. Unfortunately, when he arrived, Mike had already fallen victim to the traitor's gun. The escaped children were led to hide in an abandoned house, but soon after, Ben expressed his desire to join the resistance. Hal agreed without hesitation, not because he wasn't concerned about Ben's safety, but because he had noticed that since Ben had been fitted with the spine, his body had changed. He could now do hundreds of push-ups in one go and even run as fast as a Tesla. Shortly after Ben left, the traitor found the children's hideout. He brought them back to the desolate woods, unaware that Weaver and Tom had been waiting for him. Ben had run into Tom while escaping, and together they had planned this trap. The traitor tried to take Hal hostage, but Tom quickly shot him dead. Though they had successfully brought the children back, they had disrupted the aliens' deal with the traitor. It was clear that the aliens would not take this lightly, and a hard battle lay ahead. Fortunately, John had recently discovered that the composition of the aliens' bullets matched the hardness of their shells. Using the alien shell, he created bullets and tested them, surprisingly powerful. This was likely why the aliens had been controlling children to gather scrap metal. With these new bullets, humanity's confidence in fighting back against the alien invasion had increased. Weaver was pleased and immediately ordered John to mass-produce the new ammunition. Meanwhile, while dissecting an octopus-like alien, Dr. Grace discovered a large parasite inside the creature's body. This parasite was the same type that was used to install the spine on the children. Dr. Grace concluded that these octopus-like creatures might have been mutated humans who had received the alien spine implants. This discovery shocked everyone. Over the next few days, with Ben still able to sense the alien signals, the Resistance's professors found a frequency that could interfere with the alien communications. But since Ben could still detect the signals, it meant the children were not fully free from alien control. Sure enough, Ben wasn't the only one able to sense the signals. Rick could too. Rick went to the lab and, seeing the signal disruptor, urged Ben to destroy it. He confessed that he enjoyed being controlled by the aliens because their physical abilities were far superior to humans. He argued that humans are no match for them. If they can't beat them, why not join them? However, Ben had no intention of betraying humanity. He was determined to use his abilities to help rebuild their home. Unable to convince Ben, Rick, now transformed into a spider-like creature, clung to the wall, preparing to attack the professor and steal the signal disruptor. But Ben stopped him. Realizing he couldn't overpower Ben, Rick confessed the entire plan to the blonde girl, the first child controlled by the aliens. Rick thought that after sharing such crucial information, the aliens would favor her. But after receiving the information, the girl turned and left without a word. That's when Rick realized he had been discarded by the aliens. Seeing Rick in despair, Tom kindly reassured him that he was in a dangerous place before, but humans would always find a way to rescue their own. That's the difference between humans and aliens. Humans don't abandon their comrades, just like they won't abandon him now. Luckily, the signal disruptor didn't fall into the hands of the aliens, and humanity could still retaliate. They planned to launch a raid in 3 days. During this time, Tom and the team discovered a new type of alien, unlike any they had seen before. This one was tall and thin, with long arms and legs. It looked terrifying, and its body didn't seem to be mechanized. They wondered if their newly developed bullets would work against these slender, elongated aliens. Finally, the day of the first counterattack arrived. Captain Weaver divided the resistance into 2 teams. One team would advance to assault the alien base, while the other would stay behind to protect the civilians. The thought of facing such a powerful enemy made the resistance uneasy, but this was a battle they had no choice but to fight. Even with slim chances of success, they couldn't afford to surrender to the aliens. It wasn't just about saving their homeland, it was about protecting the dignity of humanity. The first team soon reached the outskirts of the alien base. They planned to launch simultaneous attacks in all 4 directions. However, before they could penetrate the base, an unexpected turn of events occurred. Because Rick and the blonde girl had leaked the plan earlier, the aliens had already prepared their defenses, and the first team walked right into a trap. Weaver realized the danger and immediately ordered Hal to return to the camp and evacuate the civilians. At the camp, mechanical creatures had already begun to invade, but thankfully John's specially made bullets proved effective, and the mechanical creatures quickly fell. Just as everyone began to breathe a sigh of relief, the ground beneath them suddenly shook. Looking up, they saw a massive swarm of mechanical creatures marching toward the camp. With so many enemies, their bullets were clearly insufficient. The professor worked frantically in the lab to adjust the signal jammer and finally found the correct frequency. but the signal wasn't strong enough. Ben, looking out the window at the flagpole, attached the signal line and connected it under the cover of the resistance. The strong signal caused Ben's head to throb with pain, but the aliens immediately retreated, indicating that the jammer was working. After repelling the enemy, Hal arrived at the camp and reported the frontline encounter to Tom. Tom decided to head to the front lines for rescue. They mounted the signal jammer on a vehicle, and sure enough, it forced the aliens back. Tom then took out a rocket launcher and fired at the alien spaceship overhead. A fighter jet was hit and crashed into the alien base, causing an explosion. However, this battle had been costly for the second team, and they had lost many key personnel. On the way back to the camp, Tom was blocked by an alien spaceship. The hatch opened slowly, and a very familiar girl stepped out. Tom stared in shock. It was Hal's girlfriend, Karen. It turned out that after Karen had been abducted by the aliens, she too had been implanted with the spine and turned into an alien slave. Karen told Tom that Ben was not completely free from their control, and if they wanted, the aliens could take control of him again at any time. She suggested Tom come with her if he didn't want his son to be hurt. To protect his son, Tom reluctantly followed Karen onto the alien ship, curious to see what the leader of the alien invaders was like. As soon as Tom entered, he saw a plus-sized version of the alien creature, presumably the alien leader. The leader told Tom that if they agreed to stop attacking, the aliens would designate a territory where the remaining humans could live. They wouldn't initiate any attacks. This sounded like a refugee camp, but Tom realized that if he agreed to this, they would effectively become slaves to the aliens. The leader explained that the idea had been extracted from Tom's memories. In human history, many concentration camps had existed during wars, proving that humanity's true nature was one of oppression. For the aliens to demand obedience was only logical. Despite this reasoning, Tom refused, stating that humanity would fight until the very end. Seeing that negotiations weren't going well, the leader opened the hatch and told Tom to leave. Several other humans were also released. Just as Tom was confused, the aliens suddenly opened fire, gunning down the humans who had been released with him. In a matter of seconds, the other humans were reduced to corpses. Tom realized it was a blatant threat. If humanity surrendered, there would be no space left for them to survive. On his way back to rejoin his team, Tom found a car by the side of the road. Inside, he discovered a bag of cash. In the chaos of the world's collapse, the money that people had once chased after was now nothing more than waste paper used to start a fire. Watching the flames, Tom felt an overwhelming sense of irony. On the way, he heard gunfire and recognized Weaver's voice. It turned out that the second team was still fighting the aliens. Despite the loss of many troops, the upgraded weapons and signal interference forced the aliens to retreat. At that moment, Ben noticed a barely alive octopus creature. He jumped down from the window, drew his dagger and approached it. Taking advantage of its unawareness, he stabbed the creature in the throat. Ben was proud of his clean kill, but he didn't notice a monster sneaking up behind him. Luckily, Tom arrived just in time, picking up a steel rod and stabbing the monster in the head. Hearing the struggle behind him, Ben immediately drew his gun and fired. However, the darkness of the night made it impossible for him to see that the person behind him was his father. After a gunshot, Tom collapsed to the ground. Before he fell, Tom wore a relieved smile. Seeing his son so strong and capable of fighting and protecting himself, Tom felt content, even though he had been accidentally shot by his own son. The brothers hurried to take their father back to the camp for treatment, but when John saw Tom return alone, he became suspicious, wondering why it was always Tom who managed to survive and if he could be an alien spy. Ben, unsure of what to do after accidentally wounding his father, showed a rare moment of vulnerability. Fortunately, Tom's surgery went smoothly and his life was saved. The Second Legion had almost lost a key figure due to Ben's mistake. The Legion had already lost many of its combatants and had lost contact with other groups, leaving their situation dire. The only option left was to make a final stand. Hal led a team into the city to deploy military strategies, but was bombarded by alien patrol ships. However, Hal noticed that the patrol ships only targeted the trucks, so there were no casualties. He returned to camp and shared this information with the group. Captain Weaver deduced that the alien patrol ships could probably only detect heat sources, so they could use fiberglass to disguise their heat signatures and continue their ambush plan. After surgery, Tom finally woke up but felt an intense discomfort in his eyes, as though something was wriggling inside. Dr. Grace immediately examined him and discovered a worm in Tom's eye. She hesitated to perform surgery, but Tom insisted on removing the worm, even if it meant losing his eye. He believed the worm was a tool of the aliens, and if it stayed in his body, he might become their slave. Unable to convince Tom otherwise, Dr. Grace carefully removed the worm with tweezers, placing it into a glass jar. The black worm struggled for a moment before transforming into a steel ball. It was clear that this was the work of the aliens. What shocked everyone even more was that, after the worm was removed, Tom felt no discomfort at all. In an effort to quickly relocate and re-establish contact with other legions, Ben and his team investigated a bridge that lay on their path. Just then, an alien fighter jet appeared overhead. One of the team members immediately raised his machine gun and started shooting. The fighter jet was shot down, but its crash destroyed the only bridge to the other side. The Second Legion decided to repair the bridge, but they had to ensure everyone's safety during the process. Ben volunteered to scout the enemy's position on the other side. He hid in the woods and observed the alien base, noticing that many mechanical creatures and fighter jets were stationed around it. He reported his findings to Weaver, who deduced that the base was likely a signal tower controlling the alien monsters and aircraft. If they could destroy the signal tower, the aliens wouldn't be able to act freely for a while. Without wasting time, Ben and his team took up position near the signal tower, waiting for the aliens to relax their guard before acting. They were low on ammunition and supplies, and they only had one rocket launcher, so there couldn't be any mistakes. Firing from their current position would give them only a 50% chance of hitting the signal tower. To increase the success rate, the team member carried the rocket launcher forward alone. He found the perfect spot and aimed at the tower. With a successful shot, the signal tower was destroyed. Meanwhile, the task of relocating the base was proceeding steadily. The machine gunners, originally engaged in battle with the alien aircraft, were now able to take a breath as the destruction of the signal tower rendered the enemy aircraft useless. For the first time in a long while, humanity tasted the sweet joy of victory. Unfortunately, before they could celebrate for long, John discovered that a large group of alien creatures was heading their way. Captain Weaver immediately ordered them to move at full speed, but the medical vehicle got stuck on the bridge. Tom, still badly injured, joined the fight, grabbing a heavy machine gun and unleashing a barrage of bullets. The small team on the front line began to fall one by one. In order to buy time for the others, Tom chose to fight alone, disregarding his own safety. But soon he realized that he alone couldn't take on the aliens. There was no need for a pointless sacrifice. Tom turned and started running back toward the team, but at that moment, John pressed a button and sparks flew. In a massive explosion, the bridge broke apart, and Tom fell into the water, his fate unknown. Hal and Ben were devastated and wanted to go rescue their father, but the soldiers desperately held them back. Watching this heartbreaking scene, John's expression was oddly ambiguous. Meanwhile, Weaver received news that there was an airport nearby, and no alien activity had been detected there. They could head to the airport to regroup and then move their position. Just before they left, they heard footsteps near the river. Hal and Ben turned around in surprise to see Tom walking toward them. The sight of their father filled the brothers with joy. The fear of almost losing him made their bond even stronger. They all set off for the airport with the main group, completely unaware that in the nearby woods, a red-eyed monster was watching them. While the group waited for the military to regroup, Hal and Ben went out to scout the enemy's movements. They rode their Tesla motorcycles to an abandoned factory and discovered that several mechanical monsters were guarding the entrance. Something important must be hidden inside. But before they could figure out what the factory was for, they heard engines starting behind them. When they turned around, they saw a man and a woman riding off with their motorcycles. They couldn't believe it. There were thieves even in the apocalypse. Luckily, Ben had an unusual ability to sense which direction the thieves had gone. The brothers followed the thieves and arrived at a dilapidated warehouse. Sure enough, the thieves were hiding there, but they were not alone. There were a group of children with them. It turned out that the reason the thieves stole the motorcycles was to help these children, who had no homes like them and had been separated from their families. Without transportation, it was hard for them to find food, and hunger had become a part of their everyday lives. This was why the thieves had resorted to stealing. Seeing the poor children reminded the brothers of their youngest brother, who was about the same age. Moved by compassion, they decided to take some of the children back to the camp for supplies, but they never expected that the thief was none other than Captain Weaver's daughter, Jenny. Weaver and his daughter had been separated since the apocalypse and had each thought the other was dead. The emotional reunion made Weaver tear up, and they could only hold each other tightly, finding comfort in knowing they were both still alive. After gathering his emotions, Weaver immediately prepared supplies for Hal to take to the children in the warehouse. However, when Hal returned with the supplies, the children were gone, and only the remnants of an alien battle remained. The aliens must have taken them. Once the children were taken, they would likely have the back armor installed, but since they had been taken recently, there might still be time to save them. Hal and Ben immediately reported back to the camp, and Ben recalled the factory they had scouted earlier that morning. Having been controlled by the aliens before, Ben had a strange feeling that the factory was the base where the back armor was being made. Jenny's boyfriend, upon learning that the children were in danger, wanted to go rescue them alone, but clearly he didn't have the strength to do so. Weaver told him not to rush, as everything needed to be carefully planned. If the aliens were so easy to defeat, the Legion wouldn't have suffered such heavy casualties. But Jenny's boyfriend was stubborn and insisted on rescuing the children immediately, leading to a heated argument with Weaver. Jenny stepped in to mediate, publicly calling her father cruel and harsh. This deeply troubled Weaver, who didn't want to argue with his daughter after finally being reunited. Weaver awkwardly walked away, and the boyfriend seized the opportunity to take a group of children and head out on a rescue mission with Tom's youngest son among them. When Weaver realized that Jenny had acted on her own, he was terrified and immediately took a team to the factory to offer support. As they approached the factory, Tom found his little son's hat. It seemed the children had already encountered trouble. If the rescue didn't happen soon, they might already have the back armor installed. Following the old plan, Weaver divided the team into 4 groups, each infiltrating from a different direction. Meanwhile, the children who had awakened found themselves tightly strapped to experimental tables, unable to move. In front of them was a red liquefaction pool, where they could vaguely see the silhouettes of wriggling insects. It turned out that this was indeed the base where the back armor was being produced. As a burst of scalding steam erupted, an insect slid out of the liquefaction pool. The children finally realized the danger and began to scream in terror, but it was too late to regret their reckless actions. Some of the children already had their spines fused with the armor, and one large insect crawled onto a boy's back. It revealed its head, covered in sharp spikes, then suddenly jabbed them into the boy's neck, clinging tightly to his flesh. The boy's eyes immediately lost focus, and his consciousness began to fade. The insect's tail then arched up and pierced his tailbone, while the rest of its antennae stabbed deep into his body. Thus, a back armor that controlled his mind was born. The next to be possessed was Tom's youngest son. Still so young and innocent, the little boy didn't understand what was happening. He was tricked into coming by Jenny. As he felt the cold insect crawl up his back, he cried uncontrollably like a giant baby. Fortunately, Tom arrived just in time and shot the insect in the head, quickly pulling it off his body. Weaver also rushed to save Jenny, who had almost been possessed by an insect. Jenny then realized how ignorant she had been and how close she had come to putting these innocent children in danger. While everyone was busy with the rescue, Ben was drawn to the red liquefaction pool. He reached out as if to touch one of the insects swimming toward him, and the steel spikes on his back began to glow with a blue light. Ben quickly realized something was wrong. He had almost been controlled. Grabbing his rifle, he shot at the liquefaction pool, causing the insects inside to fall out. The team quickly concentrated their fire and eliminated these dangerous creatures, but one managed to bite into Weaver's leg. In pain, Weaver grabbed the rifle stock and smashed the insect into a bloody mess. Back at the camp, Jenny sincerely apologized to her father for her ignorance and recklessness. However, Jenny's boyfriend couldn't adjust to life with the resistance and longed for the freedom he once had. Reluctantly, Jenny couldn't bear the thought of him wandering off alone. So, while Weaver was asleep, she left him a farewell note. Her reunion with her father lasted only 2 days before they were forced to part once more. Soon after, something strange happened. The 2nd Legion heard explosions not far away, but they hadn't initiated any conflict. Could another resistance group be fighting the aliens? Hopeful that they might reunite with other soldiers, Weaver and Tom led a team to investigate. They discovered that a fierce battle had indeed taken place, but strangely the ground was covered in alien corpses and there was no sign of humans. The wounds on the alien bodies clearly weren't from human weapons. They wondered if the aliens were fighting each other. Just then, Hal noticed a familiar blue glow beneath the body of one of the monsters. He worked to move the corpse aside and discovered that it was Rick who was badly injured but still alive. They quickly took him back to camp for treatment. When Rick regained consciousness, he told Tom that Ben was in serious danger and that they needed to move fast to support him. Having been controlled by the aliens before, Rick could sense Ben's location. He also confessed that, because of his previous betrayal of humanity, he had sold the human resistance's battle intel to the aliens, almost leading to the annihilation of the 2nd Legion. Therefore, Weaver didn't believe Rick's words. He thought it was a trap set up by him and the aliens to capture them all. However, the one whose fate was still uncertain was Ben. Even if it was a trap, Tom had to take the risk and check it out for his son. In the end, he followed Rick back to the battlefield. There, Rick's steel spikes were glowing with blue light, and he led Tom to a basement. It was here that Tom found his son Ben, along with a red-eyed octopus-like creature. It turned out that Ben wasn't in danger after all. The real danger was the red-eyed octopus. Though they couldn't communicate, Rick acted as a translator. The red-eyed octopus explained that they didn't mean to attack humanity. They were victims of war too. Their planet had been taken over by an alien overlord, and if they didn't attack Counterattack humans, their planet would be destroyed. They originally thought that by quietly following the tasks assigned by the alien Overlord, their world could return to its original state. But now they realized how naive they had been. They didn't have the strength to resist the Overlord until they saw the human resistance. While human bodies and weapons were weaker than the aliens, they possessed an indomitable spirit and had even destroyed the alien signal towers, giving them hope. The red-eyed octopus wanted to team up with humanity to overthrow the alien Overlord. Tom, however, was confused. These aliens had slaughtered many of his fellow humans. How could he lower his guard so easily? But before Tom could ask more questions, the red-eyed octopus collapsed from its wounds. With no other option, Tom decided to bring the octopus back to camp and imprison it. When the creature regained consciousness, it told Tom that its kind had also been implanted with the spine control mechanisms used on human children. Many times, their actions were not of their own will. If they hadn't been controlled, they wouldn't have lost so many comrades in the battle. They knew the alien Overlord's battle plans, and if humanity was willing to ally with them, the chances of defeating the Overlord would greatly increase. However, time was running out. The alien Overlord had likely realized their betrayal and would soon come after humanity. As if on cue, just as the red-eyed octopus finished speaking, gunfire erupted outside. Weaver immediately assumed that the octopus had brought this trouble, and despite Tom's objections, he was determined to kill it. The red-eyed octopus, realizing the danger, broke down the door and fled for its red life. In the chaos, Rick was shot and fell to the ground. With his dying breath, he urged Ben to convince Tom to join forces with the red-eyed octopus to fight the alien Overlord. He confessed that he had betrayed his comrades in the past, but he hoped that his death could atone for his sins. Witnessing Rick's sacrifice, Ben felt a deep pain in his heart. The next morning, during an emergency meeting, Weaver's right hand suddenly began trembling uncontrollably. In the next moment, his whole body started to convulse and he collapsed, banging his head against the wall. Tom rushed over and found purple veins showing on Weaver's skin. He remembered that during the rescue days earlier, Weaver had been bitten by a large insect. It seemed that the infection had started then. Dr. Grace immediately began examining Weaver's body and discovered that the alien parasite's toxin had spread through Weaver's veins. Antiviral drugs weren't effective against this parasite. However, Dr. Grace found a way to save Weaver. Normally, when a person contracts an infectious virus, their body temperature rises and they get a fever. But Weaver's temperature was actually dropping. Dr. Grace theorized that this alien parasite could only survive in a low-temperature environment. She drew blood from Weaver, placed it in a beaker, and began to heat it up. She killed the parasites and then cooled the blood back to a normal human temperature before returning it to Weaver's body. After 8 hours of intensive treatment, Weaver's vital signs finally stabilized. Tom let out a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, while Hal and Maggie were out on patrol, Hal suddenly tripped over something. He looked down and was shocked to find the body of a boy at his feet, with clear signs of a spine implant on his back. At Maggie's prompting, Hal noticed several other children's bodies hidden under fallen leaves, making them hard to spot. These were likely failed experiments of the aliens. Hal turned the bodies over one by one, checking them carefully. To his surprise, one of the girls still had a faint pulse. He quickly flipped her over and was stunned to realize that it was Karen, his long-missing girlfriend. He rushed to carry her back to the camp for treatment. When Karen regained consciousness, she was terrified by everything around her. Only when she saw Tom did she show a look of guilt, explaining that she had been controlled by the aliens and had no choice but to force Tom onto their spaceship. However, no matter how Tom asked about the alien base, Karen couldn't remember anything, wondering if the memory loss happened after the spine removal. But neither Rick nor Ben had experienced such a thing. This situation raised suspicions, and everyone remained on high alert. Ben, who had also been controlled by the aliens, sensed that Karen still had some kind of connection to them. For the safety of the Legion, Ben suggested that his father expel Karen immediately. But Hal refused, since he had finally found his girlfriend, saying that Ben had completely changed since being rescued. While Hal was busy bringing Karen her lunch, Ben sneaked into the room where Karen was being held, trying to get her to reveal why she had come to the Second Legion. But Karen skillfully dodged his questions. She claimed that they were all now freaks with implanted spines and were no longer truly human, unable to return to their original forms. As she spoke, she effortlessly lifted the nearby iron bed, demonstrating her newfound strength. Ben tried to stop her, worried that her actions might attract the guards, but at that moment, their steel spikes lit up simultaneously, pulling them toward each other uncontrollably. Just then, Hal entered the room, and Karen quickly put on a pitiful act. Ben knew his brother was blinded by his feelings, and there was no point in explaining, so he decided the best move was to leave. Karen threw her heavy body into Hal's hormone-let-go arms, claiming that Ben had tried to assault her sexy body. Furious, Hal immediately told Maggie everything. Maggie recognized that Karen wasn't as innocent as she seemed. She advised Hal to go speak to Ben and get the full story. Since Karen had arrived at the Legion, the two brothers had been on the brink of turning against each other. Maggie wasn't unfamiliar with Karen. She had seen her before, and the Karen now was nothing like the poor girl who had been kidnapped from the armory. The innocence she now displayed seemed fake. Maggie couldn't let things continue like this. So she went to confront Karen alone, planning to deal with the troublesome woman. Sensing Maggie's intent, Karen dropped her act and immediately lifted Maggie, throwing her hard against the wall. As Maggie lay there, unable to move, Karen initially thought about killing her, but Ben arrived just in time. Karen quickly retreated into the corner, claiming that Maggie had been trying to assassinate her and that she had only acted in self-defense. She explained that the power imbalance between her and normal humans was too great, and she had accidentally knocked Maggie unconscious. Ben saw through Karen's poorly acted story, but instead of calling her out, he went along with her, suggesting that if the Second Legion couldn't accept them, they might as well run away together. The two made their way to the rooftop, holding hands before leaping down. Meanwhile, the night patrol brought in a battered John. He had escaped from the resistance during the chaos at the broken bridge, but now he was in a sorry state. Tom asked him what had happened, but John turned the question back on him, blaming Tom's future daughter-in-law for the mess. Ben wasn't in a relationship, and his little brother was still a little kid. The only possible future daughter-in-law was Karen. John revealed that Karen had joined forces with the aliens, and her current abilities were no joke. Realizing that Karen was still being held in the camp, Tom immediately sensed the danger and rushed toward the room where Karen was being kept. At this moment, Karen had already led Ben to a forest where the metal spikes on Ben's back began to glow again. He thought they were being contacted by rebels nearby, but little did he know, they had walked straight into a trap set by Karen with the alien Overlord waiting for them. Karen informed the alien Overlord that Ben was the human working with the red-eyed octopus monster. She then equipped her exoskeleton and pulled out a spine implant, saying that she wanted Ben to experience the same thing she had. Just as the implant was about to be inserted into Ben, a gunshot rang out. Tom had been tracking them and had been lying in wait. Realizing the situation was slipping out of control, Karen took the opportunity to escape, and the alien monsters launched their attack. Tom quickly made his way around to face the alien Overlord, aiming his gun with special ammunition directly at the alien's head. When the mechanical monsters saw their boss captured by a human, they hesitated, not daring to continue the attack. Tom brought the alien Overlord back to the camp, and as he was discussing with his comrades what to do next, Karen led a group of mechanical monsters in a surprise attack on the Second Legion's camp. But strangely, they only bombarded the open areas. Weaver suspected it was a feint, and Tom immediately went to investigate. Sure enough, a mechanical monster was invading through the basement, attacking Tom with a barrage of laser fire. Tom was unarmed and no match for the monster, so he had to flee while leading the creature deeper into the basement. He threw an oil lamp at it, causing a gas canister to explode. The deafening blast reduced the mechanical monster to a pile of scrap metal. Realizing the ambush had failed, Karen raised a white flag, pleading with Tom to negotiate. She promised that if Tom released the alien Overlord, they would allow the entire Second Legion to leave unharmed. It was clear that the alien they had captured earlier was important to them, but Tom, having fallen into their trap twice, no longer trusted Karen. Keeping the alien Overlord in human hands was their only chance to uncover the true purpose behind the aliens' arrival on Earth and their abduction of human teenagers. With that, Season 1 of this drama comes to an end. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.